Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla, President of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association, and I'll be your host. And we have a guest this time that's a most amazing man, and you're really going to appreciate this interview. Our guest is Ed Lark, who created this Taxpayer TV studio and is busy, offering all kinds of great programs besides ours. Ed Lark, welcome to the program.
Nice to be here, Al.
Tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I got my education at the University of California, graduated in engineering, but I had such a deep love for photography that that really took over. When I got out of school, I worked a couple of years to earn enough money to really start my first production. And I used to go to all of the travel films in San Francisco where I grew up. And I fortunately was able to latch upon one of the well-known producers in the business. And he took me under his wing, and it just took off from there. And my very first production was Sweden, because that was an area that I knew. I had lived there as a teenager for a year, and that made it a lot easier for me to associate with the people, have contacts, and over the years I found that the northern countries of Europe are just so much easier to work in than the southern countries or in other parts of the world, because they're not burdened with so many restrictions that I encountered when I traveled in other parts.
I noticed that just before we started the program, you were doing a countdown in several different languages. And that kind of indicates to me that you have some experience overseas. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as far as the different films I've done, they've most of the time in Europe, but I have been in the Middle East and also in the Orient. It's it's a real challenge when you are working in different countries. The way we would do it, any time that we wanted to create a program or a film, we had to first of all contact the country, usually the information office or the government information service. Then we had to get their cooperation. The other important thing is that you had to know your competition, because I would go out and produce films and go around and give lectures with them, as they still do today in some of the cities. But you can't do a film on Switzerland if another film was just produced the year before, so you have to wait a couple of years. So you have to know your competition. You also have to prepare very well for it. You have to know ahead of time what you're going to encounter, because every day that you're there costs you money. So if you can get through your shoot in, say, a couple of months rather than 3 months, well, you're saving quite a few $1,000s. And then finally, you want to do the subject. And fortunately, in my particular job that I had, I could choose the subjects I wanted. But those are the areas that you have to decide upon before you actually decide on any subject that you're going to do. And then once all of that comes together, you make the decision to go ahead with it. And then you're there for 2.5 months filming, but you have all kinds of cooperation. And it depends on where you are, the amount of cooperation you get. Sometimes they'll promise you the world, and you get there, and there's very little help. So then you try to struggle to make something of it, because when we had these films, I had an agent, and the agent would book my programs 1 to 2 years ahead. before I even went out to do the program. And so it was vital that you got home with something that you could produce and make it acceptable on the stage and in the auditoriums.
What were some of the subjects that you did?
Oh my, well, let's see. As I told you, I did one on Finland, I did one on Israel, we did one on Scotland and Wales and Sri Lanka, which is a fascinating place, by the way. I've done Germany and France, and then Finland and Norway. American subjects, we've done pictures on America's favorite places, San Francisco, our vanishing Old West, also Taiwan, and I'm sure there are more, but anyway.
Have you run into any dangerous situations?
Well, we try to avoid that, but I can explain one that was dangerous and didn't expect it. I was doing that film in Sweden, and I was there the whole year, so I called it Sweden year round. Well, I wanted to get a shot of an icebreaker in the Baltic, because the Baltic freezes over in the winter time. And I learned that the icebreakers are controlled by the government, not only by the government, but the military. And so I went to my tourist office there and told them what I'd like to do, and they made arrangements for me to get on an icebreaker, but I had to get on a plane and fly to northern Sweden at the just start of the Baltic. And and I was there at the time specified. The icebreaker was waiting for me. I was the only one to go on board. And once I got on board, they took off, and we went on out into the Baltic, and it was like a sheet of ice from horizon to horizon.
Oh, wow.
And you didn't see any land once we got out there. I thought it was great. I was getting some wonderful pictures, and I saw that they had a helicopter on the icebreaker. So I asked the captain if I could take a ride and fly along with the icebreaker so you could see it going. And he said, sure. And we got some good pictures. I took them slow motion so that it would smoothen out the vibration of the helicopter. But I still wasn't, and I wanted to explain that the way an icebreaker works, they don't just crash through the ice unless it's thin. But in thick ice, 2 or 3 feet thick, it isn't going to work. So the bow of the icebreaker is quite curved. So when it goes forward, it rises up on the ice, and the weight of the icebreaker crushes the ice. So it's like a scissors action that the icebreaker takes. Well, we were going along, and I thought, well, I wonder if I could get ahead of the icebreaker and settle down on the ice. And the pilot asked permission from the captain, and he said, sure. So we went about a mile ahead, settled down. I got out with my camera and tripod. And as I was walking away, I had to walk several feet away from the helicopter because the sun was behind us and was casting a shadow across the ice, which I didn't want to see the rotors in the picture.
Right.
As I was walking away, I saw these black, dark patches of ice, which means thin ice.
Uh-oh.
So I carefully walked around and got far enough away, set up my camera and tripod, started shooting as the icebreaker was coming along, and it would, the ice would split in so many different directions. And as I'm standing there, I see one split propagating right at me.
Oh, no.
And all of a sudden I was standing there, and the crack goes right between my legs.
Oh.
And of course, my heart jumped into my throat, and I grabbed the camera and tripod, even while the camera was still running. I had it on an auto run. And I ran to the helicopter, and of course the pilot saw what was happening, and he took the weight off the helicopter, and I got on one skid and one hand on the strut, and he took off. Now I have the problem of getting the camera and tripod back into the helicopter as well as myself. And it was an exciting shot, but I don't normally plan such things.
Wow, that's pretty exciting.
Well, I usually try to come back and be the one to present the films rather than have someone do it for me.
Well, how thick was the ice that the icebreaker was breaking?
Probably about 3 feet, maybe 4.
Wow.
Yeah.
How thick of ice can they break before they can't do it anymore?
That I don't know. What happens when they get too thick, it'll go in and it'll kind of rest, come to a stop, then they'll back out for several hundred yards and go full speed ahead again into it, and then they break a little bit at a time.
I see.
Until they get through. But they have to do this because there are other ships, cargo ships, coming to the various ports, and they have to keep those ports open so the cargo ships can come and go.
I see. It would seem like to be difficult if a cargo ship were following the icebreaker. The cargo ship can't turn around.
No. Usually what happens is they open the waterway first for the cargo ship, and then it can go in and out. I haven't seen them actually follow an icebreaker.
What's the most unusual country in which you filmed?
Well, unusual, it would have to be Sri Lanka. It was unusual. It's a different world. It is. They have Buddhism, Hinduism. Buddhism is about 70% of the population. Hindu about 20%, and then the other is 10% Christian and other religions. But it is. So unusual, such a different life, a different way of thinking, and they're wonderful people as well. I mean, you go along the street and you smile at people as you go by, whether it's a man or a woman, they smile back. You do that in San Francisco, they'll think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And so that is a nice part about it. The other thing is that, just tell you another little story, we had shipped our camera equipment and all the films and everything via cargo so that it would get to us ahead of time, because we wanted to do some stops in Japan and Indonesia and some other places to get ideas for new films. And when we got there, we expected to have our cargo waiting for us, but it wasn't. And we were concerned because it should have been there about a week before. Well, they put a tracer on it and still nothing. And we were staying with a family that was a doctor's family. They was educated in London, but they lived in Colombo, and we were staying with them. Well, the wife, both of whom were college educated, said, well, you know, there's a very good light reader that's in a nearby village who might be able to tell you where your cargo is. And I said, what's a light reader? He said, well, it's equivalent to a clairvoyant. And I said, I really don't believe in those things. But the days went by and still no cargo. They put a tracer on it. So at one point I said, okay, Thelma, that was her name, I'll go there. And my wife and I went with Thelma by taxi, and I said to her, now this is an experiment. I don't want to give her any idea of what's wrong or anything or what it might be. And let's try it. And so we got there. It was just a very modest little house, and we went in to the little room there that was open. The door was open, and the taxi driver went around the back to get the lady, and there were 3 of us standing there. And she walked in, and she pointed at me, and she said, "You've lost something." Yeah, I have. I mean, there are about several things you think of: losing, love, romance, money, health, But she said, "You've lost something." And then I said yes, and so I took and put some money in a betel leaf. She won't accept the money on hand. You have to put it in a betel leaf. And so I put equivalent of about $1.25 in there. And she started telling me some more facts about, well, this has come over water by air. Yeah. And it came from a foreign country. Yeah. That'll be $1.25 more.
That's a pretty good guess.
Right. So she started telling me that it was something that was misrouted. She could see it in a warehouse in a large city, and that it will be returned to me within 21 days of the day it was shipped. Wow. And so I didn't feel much comfort of that. Oh, and I said too, asked her this. I said, "How many packages do you see?" And she said, "I see 2 and 1. And I said, "What do you mean by 1? She said, "I see a long silvery thing." That was my tripod legs. All I didn't put it in a wrap it. I just wrapped some rope around the bottom and shipped it that way. And then there were 2 other. I said, "What's the color of the boxes?" She said, "One is brown, the other is gray." And that was exactly right. The one that was gray had film in it, and I had wrapped gray neoprene around it to protect it from any moisture.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, and then she said, "Don't worry," and she cut it off. And I was just as confused, I guess, as ever. But on the 19th day, and by the way, she did say that it was a mistake done by a woman. And I had no idea. But on the 19th day, the airline called and said it was misrouted. It ended up in a warehouse in London, and it's on its way back to you. And that was another thing she said. She said, "It will be coming to you from the west." And I knew that was wrong because we came from the east. And so, but she was absolutely right on everything she said. The only thing I was never able to determine is whose fault it was. But everything else she said, I've never experienced anything like it, nor have I experienced anything since, because I generally don't go to clairvoyance.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. So that was one of the most unusual experiences. It was a fascinating country, and the people were most generous.
Wow, that's really an amazing story. There's a movie I saw. This is on topic, and the name of the movie is The Secret. Mm-hmm. And there's a series of interviews with distinguished people of maybe of faith or of I guess you would call a lot of the people that write books like not Think and Grow Rich, but self-improvement type books. Anyway, the movie is fascinating, and part of the movie was a story of a rock, where people could actually use an object to change their own attitude and reactions to things. And it's almost like another dimension. And it seemed to parallel a little bit of your experience. Anyway, as I get older, I learn more, and I get more fascinated with what happens.
Yeah. Well,
now,
I was going to say one other interesting thing about Sri Lanka, and that is that they have firewalking there, and we got some fantastic shots there. And it's not a fake. We had an optical pyrometer with us from the Research Institute in Colombo, and we measured the temperature of the coals that they had. It's about 3.5 feet wide and about 15 feet long.
Right.
And it was over 1,200 degrees.
Wow.
And that's enough to melt your aluminum pots.
Yes.
And they walked along that, on top of the hot coals. We got films of that as well. And there was one time when the fellow stopped right in the middle. I mean, you could see these coals. I mean, they weren't dark. They were, red.
Yeah.
And he reached down and he grabbed a handful of these coals and threw them up and over his head and let them fall all around him. There was another one as he walked along, his sarong caught on fire, and he just reached down and brushed off the flames, and they don't burn. There's something in their religion. Now, I know people will not believe it unless
Yeah.
they see it with their own eyes.
Right. Or see your video. Now, how did you make the transition from film to video?
Well, I had worked for 45 years producing films, and I had done just about everything I wanted.
45 years, you must have started when you were 3.
Oh, thank you. I'll pay you later. But anyway, I had done all I wanted. We traveled all over the world, and I thought, well, that's enough. I've had a wonderful life. I've enjoyed what I've done. I've entertained people, informed people, and so I decided to retire. And that was in 2001. I did my last show. And I thought that it would be nice to teach, so I contacted Columbia College, gave them my resume, and they hired me to teach photography. And I did that for 6 years. But also at the same time, there was a newspaper article during that summer advertising for a TV manager, studio manager. And my wife, Joni, happened to notice and said, "Do you think you'd be interested in something like that?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, but I'll look at it and see." And so I decided, yeah, it might be fun, because I've had a wonderful life, and I've been able to do what I wanted. Not that I had millions of dollars or anything like that, but because of what my history, not history, but because of my own, you might say, efforts, that I was able to do pretty much what I wanted. And so I contacted one of the supervisors, and the supervisor said, "Sure, come on, give me your resume." And then they hired me. And so at that time, I had 2 jobs going.
And that was 12 years ago?
13, it was 2001.
Okay.
2001, so
13 years.
2000, yeah. And it's grown. When I took over the job, it was pretty sad shape, the studio, because there were some internal problems and things, and so, but over a period of time, I was able to rectify that, and we now have a very successful studio. We have people involved. And I'm surrounded by wonderful support staff, people who volunteer their times or who are extra hire that they call, and I'm just very grateful, because without them, we couldn't make this work.
How many volunteers do you have, Ed?
Well, probably about 20, I guess, altogether. Yeah, and they're just wonderful.
Yeah, I notice when I go to the website and to upload the video, the YouTube video of our program, I see other ones, and so I've been watching some of those, including some very excellent programs called Inside View with Joel Metzger,
Right.
who's going to be moderating our candidate forums coming up. But anyway, I'm just fascinated at the quality of these programs. They're always so interesting. And
Well, that's what we work at very hard, and I was a professional when I was in my own business, and I certainly learned long ago that unless you are willing to be a perfectionist, you won't survive in the entertainment world. And so I try to bring together some of those same demands and qualities so that we can do as professional job as possible with the equipment that we have.
there's, in my opinion, there's a byproduct that occurs with your work, it's more than entertainment. You seem to be able to allow the community to communicate with itself, to understand the issues better, and to understand sometimes the problems that are occurring. And also, it seems to be a way that people can express their ideas that may not be in the mainstream all the time, but need to be heard. And this is a very valuable thing in a free society. And so what I'm trying to say is that the value of what you do is much more than the entertainment, which is excellent.
Well, thank you.
Who funds the studio?
Well, actually, it's done through the cable supplier. What happens is there's a certain amount of money that comes from the cable supplier directly to the studio, but it's not really enough to support the studio. That is actually what you would call 1% of the gross that is in this county. And then the Board of Supervisors will get 5% of that gross, and they in turn will give me a certain amount of money to help support the studio. So there is no direct tax money that comes to the studio to support it.
Does the Board of Supervisors give you all of that 5%, or do they retain some of that for themselves?
No, well, I won't comment on that.
Well, they might want a finder's fee or something. Well, one thing for sure is that the studio is consistently put out an excellent product. And so apparently the funding is adequate, or perhaps the volunteers are adequate.
Well, let's put it this way. We've had to tighten our belts just as the other departments have. And it does cause a problem. We can't buy some of the new equipment that we would like, and in order to improve certain areas of the productions. But we're still able to make a go of it until the economy turns around.
Who are the people who use the studio?
Oh my goodness, the residents of Calaveras. This is devoted to them, and it's what's called public access TV. Now, it is a little bit different from commercial television. We're not allowed to put commercials on. We can have a sponsorship, and the person can mention who the sponsorship is, but you can't really plug or any hard sell. That's very important. That's against the rules. And then we find that the people themselves from Calaveras are permitted to use the studio. They can produce programs, and that's why I have classes. I have 2 10-week classes a year, once in the fall that starts in September, another one in February. And it's a 10-week class where I have basic video production, where I want to teach the people here in Calaveras to use the equipment, which the cameras, they can use, everything that the studio here, and then to produce a program for television.
How have you and your wife, Joan, enjoyed Calaveras County?
Oh,
we have 30 seconds.
Oh, we love it. We came from the Bay Area, down in the Silicon Valley area. We did that 30 years ago, and we've moved up here with our family. They grew up here, and we never regretted the move.
Ed, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. We look forward to having you in our next program.